All right, so Terence Crawford, he made a comment the other day. He was on maybe Joe Rogan show, I think it might have been. He basically said he thinks that new boxers are definitely better than the old, like the boxers from back in the day. And I disagree. Crawford, I love him. I love Crawford. I've said for the last 8 years or so, he's my favorite boxer. He's retired now, retired. Apparently he said the other day on his page that on his, I think, TikTok, or sorry, his Twitter, X, he's been given a massive fight, and he couldn't say no to it, and it sounds like he couldn't say no to the money. Anyway, my point being, I think that he's got an ego for sure, and I think because he's in the new gen of boxers, obviously, he took it rather personally. That's what I'm. Whether he really believed that truly, I definitely believe it was partially because he's in a new era. You know, that's why his reason was. That's why his decision and his answer was what it was. You know, I think the old boxers were better for a few reasons. Okay, they were tougher. It was a tougher era back in the day. Back in the day, the truth is, I think men just was generally tougher. Were tougher. Men were generally tougher. They had that kind of, it was a different kind of roll your sleeves up. If you're a man, you have to be tough, you have to be strong, you know. Don't bitch, don't moan. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. So you done it, you know, you worked hard, you trained hard, you couldn't be weak, you had to go and go and go. Your trainers are like that, the generation was like that. All the people you're fighting, the other boxers are like that. I just think it was that kind of time. That's what all men were doing, particularly if you was a boxer. So I just think they were generally tougher back then. And when you have now, a lot more of these new fighters are motivated by money. And unfortunately, Floyd Mayweather might be a bit to blame for this. Like, fighters don't really want to take too much risks now and protect their O, you know. Back in the day, Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, all the greats from back in the day, they all lost fights. But they were, for me, because they challenged themselves against the best, right? They were better, you know, they were better boxers. They were braver boxers, more courageous boxers, and tougher, and, you know, better. I think now a lot of people try and fight like Floyd Mayweather. I think we had probably more of a variety of styles back in the day as well. So that's another reason. There was typically more styles back in the day, right? You had people doing the cross guard. You had Mayweather like doing the Philly shell. You had someone like Tyson who was like an inside boxer or a swarmer, you know, or a counter. You know, you had traditional counter punchers like Marquez. You had like sluggers, you know, Ernie Shavers, George Foreman. People that would just look for Rocky Marciano, who just look for that big shot. You had the guys that would jab and move, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard's, people like that. You had guys that could do it all. I think nowadays you have less styles, you know. And yeah, I just think the boxers were better before. They tested themselves more, as I said. And each boxer, I think, could do. There were better styles. There were more styles back in the day. There were just more styles that boxers were doing. So I think that made them better as well, right? In general. So for those reasons, what other reasons can I think of? They're the main reasons, I think. The new boxers now, I think we have more science now, right? And technology. So, you know, they probably use tech to study a boxer's body in more detail, right? More accuracy, more detail. So they probably get the rest better. They probably get the supplements and nutrition better. They probably get the right amount of sleep and stuff like that. Like, they're probably generally healthier. They will be healthier because of the because of the technology available now compared to before. They will take less punishment, like in sparring and stuff leading up to a fight. Yeah, so they're healthier now, I think. They generally fight smarter now. Like, when's the last time you saw two fighters really go at it? Okay, everyone was getting hyped the other day when Eubank and Conor Benn fought, that's the first fight, the slugfest. Like that was quite regular back in the day, 10 years ago and before. That was quite regular. Like, sometimes fighters, even if you was an outside fighter, jabbed and moved, sometimes you'll just get involved in a swinging contest, in a what do they call them, in a exchanges back and forth. People were going crazy over that fight, which was a good fight, don't get me wrong, but part of the reason it stuck out so much, part of the reason it was so famous, let's say, was because it doesn't really happen these days anymore, where it happened. You'd expect that back in the day. You would expect it when their fathers fought, right? Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn, both fights were kind of like that because they hated each other. Two British boxers, both thought they were the guy. That's the only way the fight could be fought. And it goes back to my point of men, let's say boxers being tougher before, harder. It meant more. It was more about legacy. It was more about pride. It wasn't to do with the money so much, you think. I suppose the fight the other day, again, with the sons, that obviously meant something, but it only really meant something because it was the fathers that started the whole thing off, because they were men of the era, tough men, hard men, men with pride, men who didn't have the technology, had all of the heart, more heart, solid fighters, not the richest guys, their sons would have made more money than them, but they just cared, and it meant more, right? And for those reasons, I think that the old school boxers are better than the new boxers in general. That's what I would say. The best fought the best. It was a tougher world. Boxers were harder. They had more heart. They wanted it more. Money didn't get in the way of things. It was more about, it meant more. It meant more, And it was real. To be the champion of the world was a real title. Was a real, was a real something. It was a real something. You was a somebody, Nowadays there's so much different champions, and they don't care about it as much. They care about the money. So yeah, for all of those reasons, the old school boxers are better than the new school boxers. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? What are you saying? Do you agree with Crawford? You think the newer boxers are better now, more technical, or do you agree with me? Let me know.